We're right now in this really interesting kind of world where you've got biotechnologies, you've got tons of different types of testing, but you also have athletes that are still injured, athletes that are still broken, athletes that are being forced to retire early. As a researcher, that scares me. As an athlete, that scares me. I am so honored to be here. So I actually went to a Learn to Train in 2011, and Jim was actually one of the presenters. So to be on the same stage as him is huge, to be talking in front of my own mentors. So I was very, very fortunate that the three wise men kind of took me in a couple of years ago and have taught me so much about business, about health, about training, about the body, about just life. So really for me, this is hugely personal. I'm really, really grateful to be here and to be sharing a lot of stuff with you guys. So like JL said, we're gonna cover a lot of different topics and a lot of stuff that within this whole performance world aren't often talked about, but in my opinion, they need to be. Because we're right now in this really interesting kind of world where you've got biotechnologies, you've got tons of different types of testing, but you also have athletes that are still injured, athletes that are still broken, athletes that are being forced to retire early, athletes that can't take a shit, athletes that are being glued back together with drugs and really bad supplements. And after it's all said and done, a lot of the different coaches that I've worked with within my work just kind of take a step back and go, okay, we're done. Good luck. Meanwhile, their athletes can't have kids. Their athletes are having multiple surgeries before the age of 40 for joint replacements. And as a researcher, that scares me. As an athlete, that scares me. I'm not going to get into too much of my own personal kind of background, well, actually how I met Serrano up here, but if you guys want to know more about that, please come talk to me later on. But I essentially was one of those athletes that I got really screwed up at a really young age. And a lot of what you guys are going to see in this talk, it is based off of my research. So I'm a researcher at the University of British Columbia in Canada. I'm an interdisciplinary researcher, so I work between sport medicine, but then also the other stuff. So sociology, psychology, anthropology. I did my medicine, but then I'm also in the world of pharmacology and drugs as it relates to sports and as it relates to athletes. So I kind of casted a very broad net because of some of the issues that I saw. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of start off with what, like I said, what I see right now. And for me, this is it. You've got academia on one side. You guys can decide which one is who. And then you have the industry on the other. And there is, the bridge is there, but not really. Like it's about to crumble, and it does crumble. And then all of a sudden you get a new study on like protein intake that comes out. And all the meatheads are like, yeah, we're eating good. And then a couple weeks later, it fizzles off, it gets forgotten, and we move on with our social media rants about squat depth and everything else. So as somebody that's been on both sides now for over a decade, it's been enlightening. I've learned a lot, but I've also seen a lot of really bad shit. Studies that are misinterpreted, academics that don't even talk to weightlifters because, oh God, they're on steroids, doctors that won't treat them. So that's what we're going to try to do, and that's what my goal is. That's why I'm here, that's why I'm up here, that's why I'm a researcher, is to try to build that bridge just a little bit better. So hopefully you guys can help me out with this one. How many of you guys have seen this test before? Anybody? First year psych? So what do you see? Yeah, I'm that lecturer that stands up in front of her students and goes, hey, audience participation, what do you guys see? Who sees both? You guys are creative. That's what psychology. So this is a test that was kind of more assigned to psychology, but it came out about 100 years ago as a method of helping people determine like where their creativity is, where their intelligence is. But really what it's asking you to do is take your first perception, is it a duck or a rabbit, and automatically pop into it. So to me, this really encompasses the industry. We pick sides, we pick ideologies, we pick different camps to go into, and that's the first thing we see, and we stay there. So JL's intro, like, I had to hold myself together because that meant so much to me to know that he's no longer in the same camp that he was even 2 years ago. That's huge. What I see, and this is going to help you guys hopefully with how you look at athletes after today's talk, I see a androgynous image on a PowerPoint screen that's meant to completely confuse all of you. That's all I see. So my perception is a little bit different. And it's different because I learned the background, I learned the research, I learned what was trying to be done by that specific researcher over 100 years ago. I'm applying it to a situation. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to read that. I'm not even going to bother repeating it, but what I would like you to try to do is look at the date at the bottom. So 101 AD, that's a long time ago. But a lot of those methods, a lot of those ideas, they still hold true today. It's still what we're expecting of our athletes. We're expecting them to go all in. We're expecting them to give it their all. We're expecting them to essentially do what they need to do, get uncomfortable, leave it all out there in order to perform. And as a result, we've inadvertently done this. Even though we all think we're enhancing athletes, realistically, our current methods are doing the opposite. And I think maybe that's also one of the reasons why I was so nervous to get up here today. So I was like, shit, in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to tell them what they're doing is wrong and bad. But I'll come back around because it isn't. It's just a different way of looking at it. The way that I look at performance is a little bit different. So how did we get there? Why did we get there? Because we're all a bunch of assholes at the end of the day. We're expecting our athletes to do things that we're not even comfortable doing. We're expecting our athletes to perform a certain way, eat a certain way. How many guys work with collegiate level? High school? Males? Females? So that's going to come around because I'm going to try to apply some of my slides specifically to give you guys the most pertinent information I can. But at the end of the day, we're inhibiting our athletes' performance. At least that's how I see it. And it's no different than that kind of test I showed you guys at the beginning of, is it a duck or is it a rabbit? And that we think that we have to decide between, are we trying to help people get healthy or are we trying to help people become athletic? And even if we're training Gen Pop, we still kind of now are getting into this world. We want our Gen Pop to squat bigger, train harder, diet, everything else. The same kind of expectations we put on athletes when they're not the same population. Athletes are unique creatures. They're a different breed. And we're expecting them to because we're asking them to do certain physiological, sociological, emotional, a whole bunch of different things very unique to their sport, very unique to what their goals are. And again, guys, like I use a lot of, so the way that I see it is that I'm like I'm probably more just out there even than Serrano now. And so I use a lot of images to hopefully help you guys get where I'm coming from. And sometimes it's probably gonna seem a little bit like basic, but trust me, hang in there, I come back around at the end. I don't feel like I'm doing anything if I just regurgitate stuff about macros and calories and all the other shit that you guys already know. That's not why I'm here. And actually, JL gave me some confidence the other day at lunch because I was like, but what if they want macros? I can talk about carbs, fats, and proteins, can't I? And he told me that what I had planned for today is far more important. So you guys don't like it, you guys can blame him. That gets me off the hook. But essentially, how I look at performance. So let me just get some of your guys' backgrounds. How many of you guys are like trained within, let's say, more of kinesiology, sport medicine? Exercise phys, okay. How many of you guys are strength coaches? Born and bred, okay? Performance models, I'm sure you guys all know them. We all have some of them, whether we're trying to develop speed or power. There's certain factors that we have to account for. So this is my performance model. you have performance, and you have the house, which is your athlete. The inevitable is going to come. So realistically, we have to try to do something to plan for that. Because if we're inadvertently, what we're asking our athletes to do is inhibiting performance, well, we better be prepared to help them. And whether that's in the off season and we can see something coming, but it's not there yet, whether that is preseason, and you can see that you got a whole bunch of stuff happening all at once, whether it's in competition, and your athletes are getting completely destroyed, in season, so there's another one on the way and your athlete is just tanked. Or maxed out, they got nothing left. That's usually when they're injured, they're hurt, they're sick. Athlete burnout, I hate that word because I don't know if anybody of you guys have looked into the literature there. It's absolute bullshit. They're trying to make something that is just almost common sense, that if you run somebody into the ground, you're not feeding them enough, you're not giving them enough rest, you're not accounting for all the variables, yet they're going to be sick of training and sick. It just makes sense. Now I'm going to get really personal with my questions. Anybody here live in Tornado Alley? So you guys are special, kind of special. Research on this states that you pretty much are what most strength and conditioning coaches are. We enter a very dangerous zone with a pure level of optimism that nothing bad is going to happen. Even when there's a tornado warning, we still think we're going to be okay. And we're going to weather this storm and we're going to come out A-okay. This is actual research that was done in 2012. Huge, huge, huge analysis of people living in those areas. And that even when they were completely destructed from a tornado, they still were like, oh, it's never going to happen again. I'm good. So to me, that's really what a lot of coaches are right now. We're seeing athletes get hurt, but we don't change our methods afterwards. We see them getting affected on the fields. We see athletes having eating disorders. We see athletes burning out, but we're not changing our own methods. We're not taking any initiative or role in contributing to that. It's always somebody else's fault. And I think that the way we can actually start to work around this is relatively simple. We just have to first admit that we're doing something. Instead of kind of turning a blind eye and going like, no, my athlete's running out there. He totally fucked his knee up the other day when he was squatting, but he's going to go out there to practice. He's going to be fine. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to give him what he needs to do to actually maybe take a couple days off, recover, heal. He's fine. So adopt new methods, adapt old ones. I don't think that everything that is kind of out there right now is wrong. I mean, I've already learned a lot just listening to the first two presenters today, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a hell of a lot more this afternoon. So our methods, it's not that I'm saying that they're wrong. We just have to adopt them. We have to make some of them new. We have to apply them to individual athletes. We also have to realize that our methods aren't always the right methods to use for everybody. So essentially, we don't need to make processes more complicated, at least in my mind. The body's already really, really complicated. So what all we need to do is, I think, apply our stuff. That's all. Sounds relatively simple, but I'm going to give you guys another example because that's what I do best. How many of you guys have seen this before? That's it. I thought I was going all in, like crazy Canadian was going through all the American training models I could. So pretty basic performance model. So instead of using this, I'm going to recommend you guys start to do this. And I think this makes sense. Please tell me after I'm done. If you guys think I'm crazy, let me know. Serrano already tells me that all the time. Dave told me that the other day. But this is what I think is going to help us develop athletes in a sustainable and healthy way, and not just within athletic populations, but gen pop, bodybuilders, powerlifters, you name it. We first have to start with the foundations. It's just like a staircase. We have our foundations. We then have to be able to maintain and manipulate our variables before we can enhance. Because if not, we're not even on the first floor and people are already jumping up to the top. How many of you would get an athlete to do an O-lift if they can't even do a squat properly? Or a deadlift? Or they can't do a press without pain? But we do it all the time. We don't do the foundations. We don't do the fundamentals. And I'm not talking just about movement. I'm talking about health. The fundamentals, the basic aspects of health, we're not putting into our athletes. And we expect that somebody else is going to do it for us. How many of you guys work with team doctors? So who's looking after the health of your athletes? Who's responsible for that? Is it just the coaches? It's the athletes, but you guys all, most of the hands were either high school or collegiate. Do they actually know what they're looking for? Or is that on you guys?